This game is from the year 1982, from when my mom was only 19 years old. She was literally younger than what I am today. And she played against Viktor Korchnoi, who is considered to be one of the greatest chess players in the world to have never become a world champion. He was rated 2645 at the point when my mom played him, and my mother was rated 2200. So there was a big rating difference. She was only 19 years old, and she was playing one of the world's best chess players. Okay, here we go. So my mother had the white pieces, and she started with the move e4. This is back in the day when she used to play e4. After she met my father, she got converted to d4 player. And I am a d4 player, so, you know, my father converted her, and then she converted me into d4 player as well. So she went e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop b5. So we have a Ruy Lopez going on over here. Or Ruy Lopez, which is the way that I have to say it because I'm Spanish. Here, Korchnoi went for a6, and this is one of the main lines in the Ruy Lopez. Now, the idea of going a6 is that you're basically asking white to make a decision. Are you going to take on c6, or are you going to go back to a4 and just keep on with this sort of pin? A6, bishop a4 was what my mother did, and then knight f6. Now, here the main move is to castle, but back in the day, it was actually pretty common to go for d4. I mean, some people still do it, but it was more common in the past. So d4 was played here, and I mean, this is a little bit like a gambit. E takes d4 in castles. And now the idea is that white is going to be able to go e5 pretty soon. There are some crazy lines here. If knight takes e4 in this position, I can basically, you know, it looks like you're blundering a pawn, but after rook e1 and d5, you can go knight takes d4. So that is basically the idea. You're going to be getting a lot of piece activity for this. And now this is some crazy stuff. Now there's bishop d6, which is the best move because, well, right now you're threatening here on c6. So, I mean, this looks pretty crazy. Bishop d6. And if knight takes c6, there's bishop takes h2. And if takes, there is queen h4 check leading to a draw. These are some absolutely crazy lines that I just wanted to show you. But anyways, after castles, Korchnoi went for bishop e7. Obviously, he doesn't want to go for a draw or something against the 2200, who is, 19 years old. So, bishop e7, rook e1. My mom is now defending this pawn on e4, castles, and e5. So, this is the idea. Now, she's finally pushing her pawn. And now, I mean, he needs to move his knight somewhere. Knight g4 doesn't make any sense because there's h3 and the knight gets kicked out. So basically, either knight d5 or knight e8 make most sense. But after knight d5, knight takes d4 is going to happen, and this whole file is going to get open. So knight e8 was played just to keep that knight in more safety. And then my mom played c3. She could have taken on d4, but she wanted to be able to take with the knight so that her knight would be out and she would be developing even more pieces. So here, my mom is a pawn down, but because her knights are out, because a lot of her pieces are out. I mean, she has a lot of space in the center. She has the two knights, a bishop, a rook, all working. The only piece that she hasn't developed yet is the bishop. Whereas Korchnoi, he still is pretty undeveloped on his side. He still needs to develop a lot of pieces, and he's definitely a lot more cramped. So there's definitely compensation here for the pawn. So after this, Korchnoi went for d6. This is very common. I mean, if white has all the center, black needs to somehow try to break the center and exchange the central pawn for their pawn. So here, my mom took on d6. There's not really a lot more that you can do. And after e takes d6, well, now black has to make a choice. What are you going to take with? But no matter what black takes with, probably my mom would have done the same move, which is to go knight d5. Now, the reason why he took with the pawn was probably just because he wanted to sort of consolidate this file, but also if bishop ever takes c6, after pawn takes c6, then these pawns are actually going to be pretty good together, and after something like d5, black is going to get a pretty good center. So this was probably a reason he took with the pawn. Here, black played bishop f6, just because there was the threat of taking on c6 and then taking on e7, so the bishop needs to move. And in this position, my mom wanted to develop another piece. Now here, maybe one idea could have been to go bishop c2, to then go queen d3 and sort of try to checkmate over here. Is because the bishop is on f6, there is no way for the knight to get to f6. So the king now is going to be pretty weak. But my mom went instead for bishop e3, the idea being to take control of this b6 square. Now here, black played bishop e6, just because, just to put pressure on this knight on d5. Now here my mom went bishop b6, the queen has to move, and after queen d7, she went rook c1. Knight f4 could also have been an idea here to later go knight h5, but she went for rook c1, and now there's actually a lot of tactics going on here. Black went for bishop takes b2, and after bishop takes b2, there's actually a really good move here, which is rook takes c6, which is just a really beautiful move. The idea is that if black takes on c6 with the pawn, they lose because there's bishop takes c6, and after queen takes c6, there's this fork over here winning the queen. So you can't really go for this. So in this position, after rook takes c6, black needs to take on d5, and now there is rook c4, putting the rook in a square where the bishop can take it. But the queen is under attack, so the queen needs to move, and after the queen goes somewhere, maybe to f5 or something, then you can bring on the knight, and all of a sudden, all of white's pieces are right now working with queen g5. There's bishop e3. I mean, it's basically going to end up with white getting a lot of activity here. I mean, queen e5, you move the rook to c2. And okay, this is very hard to play because white is a piece down, but white just has amazing pieces and the queen is in a very, very, very awkward square. So this is actually a really cool line. But rook c2 was played. This looks like a lot more natural than getting into this crazy line being a piece down. So rook c2, bishop f6, and then knight b4. Makes a lot of sense just to attack this knight, which is right now pinned, this bishop. So bishop d8 was played. Black wants to exchange their bishop for this bishop on b6, as this bishop on b6 is right now taking a lot of squares from black, and also maybe to be able to go knight f6, as this knight on e8 is not really doing a lot. So now my mom went for rook takes c6, because after pawn takes, there's bishop takes c6, and she will be getting the rook on a8. So queen c8, and now there's, well, first bishop takes d8, because if she takes here immediately, well, then there might be bishop takes b6. So takes, and now she took on a8. Now in this position, my mom is a pawn down, so she has to be a bit careful. I mean, yes, she still has some better pieces. Her pieces are more active. This pawn is a bit weak. This knight is not doing anything. But if black has the chance to regroup their pieces, then black is just going to be better in the endgame. So here my mom went for the move knight g5, and the idea is that she's threatening this bishop on e6. Yeah, just to take. So here black went for a5, just threatening my mom's bishop. Now in this position, my mom went for this intermediate move, intermezzo. Now I don't know what the fancy word in chess is for this, but queen c2, threatening this pawn on h7, or threatening, I mean checkmate. And well, the idea here is that after knight f6, there is knight c6. So now she's also defending this square for the knight, threatening to perhaps go knight e7 at some point, maybe knight f5, especially if she's, somehow able to take this. I mean, getting a knight on f5 would be amazing. So here black needs to be a bit careful. The bishop is under attack, so black went for rook e8, just defending the bishop. Now here, there's also maybe the idea of going knight b4 and putting some extra pressure on the bishop, but my mom decided before she did anything else to go h3 and just get some air for her king. So h3 was played here, a4, and then rook d1, putting pressure on this pawn that is weak. Now in this position, I mean, it might have been objectively better to go for something like takes, and then go for something like knight d4, just to put some pressure on this, because if something, I mean, it's kind of hard to defend this pawn now, and if you push like e5, then there is knight f5 threatening this pawn. So it might have been better to go for something like this, objectively better. But here, she went instead for rook d1, putting some pressure on this d6 pawn, which is weak. Here, black went for h6. If white does not take on e6, if for instance white goes something like knight f3, then there is bishop takes a2, because after queen takes a2, this knight is hanging. So it's important right now to take on e6. That is the only move. So after knight takes e6, if pawn takes e6, there is rook takes d6. So black needs to go rook takes. And here, my mom went for rook b1, just because the rook here on d1 is not really doing anything anymore, as this pawn is already defended. So she's putting the rook in an open file, and that is what you always want to do in chess. You want to put your rooks in open files, because that is where they are productive, you know? That's where the rook shines. Rook b1, the threat is also to go rook b8 check, winning the queen. So knight d7 was played to avoid rook b1, and here she went for rook b4, threatening this pawn on a4. Now, here, white has counterplay. White has really active pieces. He went for queen e8, the idea being that, well, you guys will see after queen takes a4, black is just right now trying to put all their pieces in better squares. So a lot of times when you're a pawn up, you actually don't, like, force yourself to keep on being a pawn up, but what you try to do is that you try to give up the pawn in good circumstances, where you will be basically sacrificing back the pawn, but getting a better position for your pieces. So yeah, after queen takes a4, knight c5, now all of a sudden, all of black's pieces are getting very, very active. And if this knight moves from c6, I mean, it could get scary if the queen is ever able to get on this diagonal. So queen b5, it's important to defend the knight, of course. King h7 was played just because black wanted to avoid queen b8, exchanging queens. Because if white exchanges queens, I mean, maybe white will be better in the endgame, because white has an a pawn instead of a d pawn, and the d pawn is closer to the king, so it's easier to stop the d pawn, whereas this white pawn on this side might become more dangerous in endgame. So here, rook d4 was played. Idea is just simply to put the rook in a better square, put some pressure on this pawn so that if this rook moves, this pawn will be hanging. Another idea is also that if, for instance, black would go something like d5, then you can take the pawn, because if takes here, then the knight is hanging. So rook g6, now king h2 was played, because my mom was kind of scared of, well, obviously, queen e1 looks a bit scary. So she just wanted to get the king out of this file. Now queen e1 was played by Korchnoi, which is a really good move, threatening this pawn on f2, and now it's starting to look very scary for my mom's king. So here she went for queen b2 just to defend the pawn. It's almost, you know, one of the only moves. And now knight e4 would probably have been a really good move. It's kind of hard to see exactly how white is going to defend this pawn after something like knight e4. Probably after knight e4, white needs to try to get some counterplay with knight e7, but this is definitely, like, very scary. After queen b2, white went queen f1, threatening checkmate, and here rook g4 was played. My mom definitely wants to exchange rooks. This rook over here is a lot more dangerous than what my mom's rook is on d4. So here black played knight d3, the idea being to threaten both the queen and this pawn. Queen c2, just so that if rook takes, pawn takes, and knight takes then is not possible because of the pin, and if queen takes, the knight is hanging. So knight e1 was played, and then queen f5. After queen f5, things started turning around in this game. My mom is threatening this pawn on f7, and this is actually a really hard position for black to play. So black went knight takes g2, and here there is a great move, which is knight e7. There is a pin going on right now, and well, I mean, it's really hard to see what, you know, black can do. The threat is to go knight takes g6, pawn takes, queen takes, and then, you know, just checkmate. And it's really hard to see what black can do. So black went knight e3 in this position, and people, at this point, my mother could have won the game by going queen takes f7, which is just a really beautiful move. The idea being that if rook takes g4, there's queen g8 checkmate. And it's actually really hard to see what Black can do. I mean, the engine is saying that this is a mate in 13. I mean, there's nothing Black can do. The engine is saying that the best move is queen takes f2. If knight takes here, then there is this. So this would have won the game. But here in this position, my mom took on e3 because, well, she was going to be a piece up against against Viktor Korchnoi, but in this position there is a repetition check, and I am not sure if she missed it or what happened, or if she was just happy, content with the draw because it was against such a strong player. But my mom at the age of 19 had one move before it ended up being a repetition draw, a complete win against Viktor Korchnoi, which was crazy. I mean, guys, imagine a 19-year-old girl in those times just completely beating one of the world's best chess players. But my mom actually beat Viktor Korchnoi another time, and I actually have a video in my YouTube channel already about that, which I will link in the description box if you guys want to see that. My mom has always been a really big inspiration to me. From a very young age, I understood that just because there are few women in chess, it doesn't mean that you can't be a woman and, be the best. I mean, my mom was never maybe the best in the world, but during her time, she really proved that she could beat, all of these really strong players. And that has always really inspired me in my life as well. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Once again, let me know if you want to see more mom, if you want to see more videos or more recaps of my mom's games. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and like and subscribe if you enjoy the video and the game. Bye bye, people. Take lots of care.